Hello, I'm going to talk about some key elements that will enable international multidisciplinary groups better achieve fair outcomes for their work. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians in all nations. I honour their profound connections to land, water, biodiversity and culture, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I'm going to concern myself today with the case of environmental and earth science working groups. These are groups of experts who meet face-to-face or remotely over a sustained period of time around topics of concern which each group member or their organisations have a desire to solve or at least advance. Members are usually chosen for their knowledge and expertise and perhaps their ability to represent a vested interest. In the environment and earth sciences, national boundaries are irrelevant to most topics, and often few group members will know one another personally in consequence. However, most pertinent to this talk are that the groups are outcome-oriented. For researchers, publications, impact factors and citations are the goal. The same applies to data and code. Here is a depiction of a typical interdisciplinary international working group. Interdisciplinarity and internationality are but two of the sources of diversity in the group. This can also include career stage, organisational type, and gender. In consequence, one of the primary targets or purposes of tasks of the group is to blend independent people, to enable them to work together, to trust one another, to share their intellectual property and their expertise to achieve the common goal and the outcome desired. This is not easy, as trust and purpose takes time to build. And in this, there are many possibilities to support this, but here are two examples. One is that it appears the proportion of women in a group greatly enhances the sense of participant satisfaction that the group is functioning well. Equally, publication rate. Publications increase that sense of purpose, of positive function in the group, and therefore having a flow of publications can be a really positive thing. Of course, underpinning this is providing a secure working environment, starting with the principles: transparency of all the work across all the group members, ethical behaviour and respect for one another and the different parties, both the people and for the work that is in progress. Providing a shared work platform and shared storage space that every member of the group can access and can see is vital. Having regular communication in different ways or forms is also important to keep people up to date, and a system of versioning for the work. So as most of these group members will not be fully employed on the group work, they will step in and out. Knowing where if one subgroup is doing some work, someone who stepped out can step in and can catch up quickly and therefore contribute meaningfully to the work of the group is really vital. And of course, last but not least, accommodate time zones so everyone has an opportunity to be in their best form for some of the work. Of course, these groups are heading towards a fair outcome. And to help discuss this for the rest of the talk, I'm using a little analogy, which is of the owl and the pussycat who set to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. So said Edward Lear in a discussion, in a story in the 19th century. I'm quite attracted by this as an analogy because the owl and the pussycat are two completely different beasts and in fact rivals, if not enemies, most of the time. But here they are, collaborating and cooperating in their adventure into the seas. In addition, they have different skills that they bring to bear to their journey and their adventure. The owl is playing a ukulele and singing, in fact, and the cat is making sure the boat is going in the right direction. We'll follow these two animals during the rest of the talk. So first, focus on the researcher. And the first deal is to give each researcher their persistent identifier and make sure that they are activating it to the maximum, so they are maximising the benefit they get from it. And here we have the owl and the pussycat getting their orchid ID. The next step is to get a data management plan, or the new generation data and digital object management plan. Make one early. It'd be a data mentor, every team should have one. Would it be great to help the team start their DDOMP and set up an easy-to-follow regular review system for dedicated team members to follow? We've got an example here of our DDOMP for the Parsec project, and which we have found very useful. Version 2, they're a living object. Then, of course, when the group starts their work, they assemble their data, and much of this data comes from their own sources indeed, but also from others, either government or other researchers. So they really need to check the permissions to access and use the other people's data in this way, and code. And while they're checking that license, they should be recording any attribution requirements and, of course, provenance notes. And while they're doing that, they may as well choose the license for their own data that they mean to produce. Then that's done. Of course, choosing a home for their data and code at the end is also something that is well done at the beginning, and we have now these increasing number of trusted repositories which will have some persistence. We hope they'll have quite a lot of persistence, and they also have staff to help the working group in their work, which will make their lives much easier. And in the interim, we mustn't forget a good solution for safe but shared storage sites for work in progress. Then, of course, we need to, when the work is really beginning to start, it's a good thing to start well and to use community-accepted semantic vocabularies when you are blending and harmonising the data. Then your data, in the end, will be machine discoverable. Make sure you create rich metadata. Make sure the metadata is super rich for reusability and reproducibility of your data and code. Use a recognised dialect, for example EML or ISO, and include clear licensing statements all along the way, particularly if you're using data or creating data that depends on protected information. So you will get there in the end to publishing data and code, and you will get a persistent identifier for your metadata and code when you deposit in a licensed and trusted repository for your digital objects, papers, Perl, etc. And this will link to the author's ORCID. And therefore, discovery, citations, reuse, funding and promotion will all follow. In the Parsec project, we have gathered together most of these objects here, these tasks here, in a Ready Reckoner checklist. And here we have, for example, temporary storage in a Google Drive, Open Science Framework, that will then transfer to our repository, which we've chosen as the Environmental Data Initiative. We have software development being stored in a dedicated GitHub site. We are preserving, when we've created it to a certain degree, our software in Zenodo, and we're also preserving our training and workshop material, conference presentations in Zenodo. So we're getting publications along the way, DOI publications. We're continually updating our ORCID, and of course we're keeping everything transparent by having a Zotero site for our references, so our team members are advantaged and don't have to repeat work. So there are we, I hope, as well as the owl and the pussycat, sailing happily in the fair data seas, with all their equipment in hand, and their publication will be seamless. At least so we hope. And I'd like to thank all of the providers and supporters of the Parsec project, and I'd like to thank you, the audience. Thank you very much indeed.